The scrape of a chair, a mocking laugh, then fingers at her throat. The classroom froze. 30 pairs of eyes widened, but no one moved. Naomi Carter, the teacher they thought was just too soft, stood cornered by a bully who believed respect could be taken by force. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls, so heavy you could hear hearts beating. But what that boy didn't know was that Naomi was forged in storms far harsher than any classroom, and the lesson she was about to teach would echo louder than any textbook. This is her story. If you believe no teacher should ever be disrespected for the color of their skin, hit like and subscribe now. Because in the next few minutes, you'll see how one arrogant bully thought he could humiliate a woman, only to discover she was forged by fire and stronger than he could ever imagine. The slam of a desk echoed like a gunshot. Students jumped in their seats, pencils clattering to the floor. Every head turned toward the back of the classroom where Tyler Briggs lounged, a smirk plastered across his face like he owned the world. He had kicked the desk in front of him forward, just to watch the smaller boy sitting there flinch. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp, the kind of snickering that stung worse than words. At the front of the room, Miss Naomi Jordan set down her marker. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't storm down the aisle. She simply turned, eyes steady, posture straight, her calmness louder than any shout could have been. "Tyler," she said evenly, "that's enough." But Tyler didn't stop. He leaned back in his chair, arms stretched wide, swagger dripping from every gesture. "What?" "Just having a little fun." His gaze darted to the class before landing back on her. "Lighten up, Miss Jordan. Or is discipline only for people like me?" The words were a dagger wrapped in arrogance, dipped in poison. The room fell silent. Every student knew Tyler's game. He was the kind of boy who tested every adult, who thrived on making people uncomfortable. His family's money made him bold. His father's influence made him untouchable. Or so he thought. Naomi's eyes didn't flinch. Disrespect isn't fun. It's weak. Tyler's jaw tightened. For a flicker of a second, the mask cracked. But then he pushed himself up from his chair, slow and deliberate, as if rising to a stage. His sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as he walked down the aisle, straight toward her. The air grew heavier with every step. A girl in the front row shifted uneasily. A boy at the back raised his phone, the red recording light blinking faintly. Everyone felt it. Something was about to happen. Tyler stopped inches from her desk, his height forcing him to look down on her. "You think you're tough, huh? Standing there all calm like you're better than me." His voice dropped lower, colder. "You're not." Naomi's face was unreadable. Not anger, not fear, just focus. "Sit down, Tyler," she said. But Tyler didn't sit. He leaned in, his breath hot, his smirk cruel, and then, in a move that made the entire class gasp, his hand shot out and wrapped around her throat. The room exploded. Gasps. A stifled scream. Desks scraped back as students jumped to their feet. Phones lifted higher, some shaking from the sheer shock of what they were capturing. "Yo! He grabbed her!" someone whispered, voice trembling. Tyler's grip wasn't tight enough to choke, but it was firm, an act of dominance, of humiliation. His voice cut through the stunned silence. "What are you going to do now, huh? Call the principal? Cry for help? You're just a teacher. You can't touch me." The smirk on his face was more dangerous than the hand on her throat. He believed every word he was saying. He believed he had already won. Naomi didn't thrash. She didn't claw at his hand. She didn't beg. Her eyes locked onto his with a calm so unnerving that Tyler's smirk faltered for half a breath. To the students watching, she looked like a storm held behind glass, restrained but ready to shatter at any moment. Her voice, when it came, was low, controlled, deadly calm. "Tyler," she said, each word deliberate, "you don't know who you're dealing with." The tension in the room coiled tighter. A boy in the back muttered, "Oh my God!" A girl's hand hovered over her mouth. Every student knew this wasn't just another disruption. This was a line crossed so far it couldn't be undone. But Tyler only squeezed harder, forcing a laugh. "Scary words, Ms. Jordan." "What are you gonna do? You're just a—" He didn't finish, because in her eyes something shifted. A flicker of something most of them had never seen before. Not in a teacher, not in a parent, not in anyone. It was the kind of look soldiers wore in movies, the kind of steel that made the air heavier. Tyler felt it, even if he couldn't name it. His hand twitched against her throat. Phones kept recording. Students kept holding their breath. And Naomi stood perfectly still, every muscle ready, every breath measured. She wasn't the one trapped in this moment. Tyler was. The silence in the classroom was deafening. No one could look away. And that was when it became clear. This wasn't going to end the way Tyler thought it would. Tyler's hand was still on Naomi's throat when the first voice broke the silence. "Somebody do something!" a girl whispered, her words half plea, half panic. But no one moved. No one dared. The weight of Tyler's arrogance, the grip of his entitlement, pressed down on the classroom harder than his fingers pressed Naomi's skin. "See?" Tyler sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nobody's gonna save you." Not them, not the principal, not anybody. You don't belong here. The words dripped with venom. His friends in the back snickered nervously, unsure if they were laughing with him or trying to mask their fear. Phones stayed raised, lenses locked, every second of humiliation captured for the world beyond these walls. Naomi's expression never cracked. Her voice, quiet but steady, cut through the noise. "Let go, Tyler." Tyler leaned closer, close enough that his shadow fell across her face. "Or what? You gonna call my dad? He pays more in taxes than you make in a year. You're nothing." The laughter returned, louder this time, feeding on his cruelty. It wrapped around the classroom, suffocating. But Naomi didn't shrink. She didn't fight against his grip. She did something no one expected. She smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't mocking. It was small, controlled, and chilling. A smile that didn't belong to a victim. A smile that carried weight. And in that single moment, the atmosphere shifted. A murmur rippled through the room. The students couldn't explain it, but they felt it. Something was off. Something about their teacher's calmness was wrong for this situation. Tyler's smirk faltered, just slightly. "What's so funny?" he demanded. Naomi's eyes locked onto his. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried across the room like thunder. "You're making a mistake you'll regret." The way she said it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The boy holding his phone swallowed hard. His hands trembled. Another lowered her camera altogether. The vibe had shifted from entertainment to something darker, something dangerous. Tyler tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked halfway. He tightened his grip, desperate to hold on to control. "You don't scare me." But the truth was already seeping in. She did. Naomi didn't move yet. Her restraint was terrifying. Not weakness, not fear, but patience. The kind of patience that suggested she had faced worse than this. Much worse. Her mind wasn't in the classroom anymore. It was flashing back. Dim corridors overseas, the weight of desert heat, the echo of boots on gravel, the sensation of hands around her throat in training exercises where failure meant more than embarrassment. Tyler Briggs had no idea. No idea that the woman he thought was just a teacher had once dismantled men twice his size in silence. That her hands had held weapons, her body pushed through the worst conditions imaginable. That she had been trained to endure, to fight, to win. And here he was, a boy with arrogance mistaken for power, thinking he had control. The classroom clock ticked. The silence pressed harder than the laughter ever had. Finally, Naomi shifted. Not much. Just enough for the students closest to her to notice the subtle tightening of her stance, the way her shoulders squared, the way her eyes sharpened. And though no one could explain why, they felt it. The storm was about to break. Tyler felt it too. His smirk weakened further. He leaned back slightly, his grip loosening without him realizing it. "You think you're tough, huh?" Naomi didn't answer. She didn't have to. The students, their phones, the buzzing silence, they all waited for what came next. And Naomi Jordan, ex-Navy SEAL turned teacher, was finally ready to remind the world exactly who she was. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed louder than the students' shallow breaths. Tyler's hand lingered at Naomi's throat, but the room felt like it was holding its own breath, waiting. Everyone sensed it. The calm was about to rupture. Naomi's gaze stayed locked on him, still unflinching, still unnervingly calm. That smile, small, controlled, hadn't left her face. "Let me go?" "Or what?" Tyler's voice cracked slightly, betraying the arrogance he was desperately trying to maintain. "You're not going to do anything." "You can't. You're just—" He didn't finish. Naomi moved. It was subtle at first, so fast that most of the students didn't catch the mechanics of it. 1 second, his hand was on her throat, his weight looming over her. The next, his wrist was twisted, pinned, his arm bent in an angle nature never intended. Tyler let out a strangled yelp, shock widening his eyes. "What the—" Naomi's movements were fluid, efficient. She wasn't just defending herself, she was dismantling him. She stepped to the side, redirected his weight, and in less than 3 seconds, the boy who thought he owned the room was slammed against the chalkboard, his arm trapped behind his back. The sound echoed, a dull thud that made the entire class flinch. Phones wobbled in trembling hands, a few dropping altogether. The laughter was gone, replaced by stunned silence. Naomi's voice, low and steady, cut through the tension. "First lesson, Tyler. Never put your hands on someone unless you're ready for the consequences." Her grip tightened, just enough to make him grunt in pain. His arrogance was leaking out with every breath. "Second lesson," she continued, calm as ever. "Never mistake silence for weakness." The students were frozen. Nobody dared move, not even to breathe too loud. The girl in the front row, who had looked ready to cry moments ago, now sat wide-eyed, her jaw slack. A boy at the back whispered, "Oh my God, she's not playing!" Tyler struggled, but every twitch of resistance only sent fresh pain shooting through his arm. He hissed, trying to mask fear with bravado. You can't do this. I'll have your job." Naomi leaned close enough for only him and the first 2 rows to hear. "Jobs don't scare me, Tyler. But men who think hurting people makes them powerful? I've been breaking them down my whole life." Something flickered in his eyes then. For the first time, Tyler looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, Just a boy, crushed by the weight of a reality he couldn't spin into laughter. Naomi released him abruptly. His body stumbled forward, colliding clumsily with a desk. His chest rose and fell in panicked bursts, his hand cradling his twisted wrist. He looked less like the predator he had imagined himself to be, and more like prey caught in his own trap. She turned her back on him, a move so bold, so absolute, it sent another ripple through the room. No fear of retaliation, no glance to check if he would try again. Just complete control. "Class dismissed," she said. No yelling, no dramatic threats. Just 2 words, crisp and commanding. The students didn't move at first, as if their legs had forgotten how to work. Then slowly, hesitantly, they gathered their things, still watching her like she had transformed into someone entirely different in front of them. Tyler staggered back, his voice weak, but loud enough for everyone to hear. You'll regret this. My dad will—" Naomi turned then, and for the first time since it began, her voice rose. "Enough!" The word cracked like thunder. Tyler froze mid-sentence. "Your father can't protect you from the truth," she said, "and the truth is this. You crossed a line you never should have. I'm not your victim, Tyler. I never will be." The authority in her tone was military, undeniable. Even the students felt it vibrate in their bones. And in that moment, bits of Naomi's past began to leak through the cracks of her composure. She didn't just sound like a teacher anymore. She sounded like someone used to giving orders, used to commanding people far tougher than Tyler Briggs. The boy shrank into himself, his bravado dissolving into silence. One of the students whispered, almost reverently, "She's different, like she's been through something." The bell rang then, shrill and sudden, breaking the standoff. Students filed out quickly, whispering to one another in hushed, urgent tones. Phones buzzed with messages, rumors already spilling into the halls. But Naomi remained at the front of the room, arms folded, steady, unshaken. Tyler lingered by the door, his shoulders hunched, his face pale. His friends didn't wait for him. No one did. "Go," Naomi said, her voice quiet but firm. He obeyed. When the room was finally empty, Naomi exhaled, her composure still intact, but her mind buzzing. She had crossed her own line today. The training she thought she had buried deep had risen back to the surface. The Navy SEAL inside her wasn't gone. She had just been waiting. And now, the whole school would know. The echo of the last bell had barely faded when the storm began. Naomi Jordan sat at her desk, still and composed, her pen gliding over the stack of ungraded essays as though nothing had happened. But inside, she knew the quiet wouldn't last. It never did. And right on cue, the heavy thud of hurried footsteps filled the hallway. Then the door burst open. Principal Harris swept in, his tie crooked, his expression tight with urgency. Behind him trailed Tyler Briggs, face pale, arms still cradled, and beside him, a man who radiated authority the way fire radiates heat. Mr. Briggs. Tyler's father wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. A businessman with influence that reached into the school board, the city council, and beyond. He strode into the room like he owned it, his gaze sweeping over Naomi with the kind of disdain reserved for people he thought beneath him. "What the hell happened here?" Harris demanded, his voice sharp but quivering beneath the surface. Tyler jumped in before Naomi could open her mouth. "She attacked me, in front of everyone. She twisted my arm and—" "Enough!" Mr. Briggs cut him off, raising a hand. His eyes narrowed at Naomi. "Is it true? Did you lay your hands on my son?" The room felt smaller, tighter, the walls pressing inward. But Naomi didn't flinch. She placed her pen down, folded her hands neatly on the desk, and spoke with calm clarity. "Your son put his hands on me first." Around my throat, in front of the entire class. Harris shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Jordan, that's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," Naomi interrupted, her voice like steel. "It's a fact. Every student in that room witnessed it. Several recorded it." For the first time, Briggs's composure faltered. His eyes darted briefly to his son, whose silence betrayed more than his words had. Still, he straightened, puffing his chest. "My son wouldn't do that. He's been raised better than to—" Naomi leaned forward, her voice low, precise. "Then perhaps you don't know your son as well as you think." The air thickened. Harris rubbed his temple, torn between his duty to the school and his fear of Briggs's influence. "Look, whatever happened, we need to handle this properly. Naomi, maybe you should step aside for now. Pending review." "Step aside?" Briggs barked. "She should be fired on the spot, assaulting a student. This is grounds for immediate termination and criminal charges." Tyler smirked faintly at that, emboldened by his father's rage. But Naomi rose slowly to her feet, her posture commanding, her eyes sharper than any blade. "You want to talk about charges? Fine, but let's start with attempted assault on a teacher. Your son put his hands around my throat. That's not discipline. That's not a joke. That's a crime." The words landed heavy, slicing through the room. Even Harris froze. Briggs scoffed, though his voice carried a trace of unease. "You think anyone will believe your word over mine? Over his? We'll bury you under lawyers before this even sees a courtroom." And that was when Naomi's calm broke. Not into panic, but into something else entirely. She stepped out from behind her desk, her movements precise, deliberate. Her voice carried the weight of command, honed by years most of them couldn't imagine. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know what I've done, what I've seen, or what I'm capable of. But you should know this. If you think intimidation is going to silence me, you're dead wrong." Her presence filled the room, pressing on Briggs harder than any threat could. And then, like a knife slipping between ribs, she added, "I've faced men twice your size and 10 times your power, and they fell just the same." Briggs blinked. Harris blinked. Even Tyler's smirk dissolved into confusion. Naomi wasn't just a teacher. They could feel it now. Every word, every stance, every inch of her posture screamed it. This wasn't a woman who cowered in the face of power. This was someone who had lived in the fire and come out forged steel. The silence stretched long and heavy. Finally, Harris cleared his throat. "Naomi, what exactly are you saying?" She didn't answer right away. She let the weight of the moment settle, the truth circling them like a storm waiting to break. Then, finally, her words landed with quiet finality. "I'm saying your teacher isn't just a teacher. I served 15 years as a Navy SEAL, and I don't back down from bullies. Not in uniform, not out of it. The revelation hit the room like a grenade." Tyler's eyes went wide. Harris staggered back half a step. Even Briggs, the man who thought he owned every space he walked into, lost his voice for a moment. The silence that followed was deafening. Naomi didn't need to say more. The truth was out now. The balance of power had shifted. And for the first time in his life, Tyler Briggs wasn't the most dangerous person in the room. The room had gone silent after Naomi's words. "I served 15 years as a Navy SEAL." It was more than a revelation. It was a shift in power so sharp it left Principal Harris speechless and Briggs momentarily stunned. Even Tyler, clutching his wrist, stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. By the next morning, the silence had shattered. The video was everywhere. Students had uploaded clips, hashtags were trending, and Naomi Jordan's name was in every hallway whisper. Some parents demanded she be fired. Others praised her strength. The story was no longer just a school incident. It was a community reckoning. That night, the school board called an emergency meeting. The gymnasium was packed wall to wall, parents buzzing, reporters lining the back with cameras, students craning their necks to see the woman at the center of it all. Naomi sat in the front row, calm, composed, her shoulders squared like she was back in briefing before a mission. Principal Harris cleared his throat, fumbling through opening remarks, but the crowd wasn't listening. All eyes were on her. When she finally stood, the room hushed. "I came here to teach," Naomi began, her voice steady, "to give your children knowledge, guidance, and respect. But yesterday, when a student put his hands around my throat, I was forced to defend myself. I didn't do it to humiliate him. I did it because I refused to be a victim." A ripple of murmurs spread, but she pressed on. "Yes, I was a Navy SEAL. I've faced violence, war, and men who thought fear made them powerful. I walked away from that life to stand here, to teach, to build futures. But my past doesn't vanish just because I'm in a classroom. It's part of me, and it's why I won't tolerate bullying, not against me, and not against anyone else." The crowd stirred. Some clapped quietly. Others glared. At the back, Briggs shot to his feet, voice booming. "She's dangerous. She doesn't belong here. My son—" Naomi turned her gaze on him, sharp and unflinching. "Your son put his hands on me." Your son thought intimidation made him strong. If yesterday taught him anything, it's that strength without respect is nothing. All heads swiveled to Tyler. The boy slumped in his seat, his usual smirk gone. For once, he didn't meet anyone's eyes. Naomi softened her tone, just slightly. "Tyler, look at me." Slowly, reluctantly, he raised his gaze. "I could have hurt you," she said, her voice low, carrying only for him and those in the first rows. "But I didn't. Because real power isn't in causing pain, it's in knowing you don't have to. That's what you need to learn. And if you do, maybe one day, you'll be more than your father's shadow." The boy blinked, his bravado cracking into something else. Shame, maybe even understanding. The board president stood then, papers trembling slightly in his hand. "After reviewing the evidence, we find Ms. Jordan acted in self-defense. She will remain at this school." The gym erupted. Cheers and claps from one side, outrage from the other. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. But Naomi didn't flinch. She simply sat back down, calm as ever, her expression unreadable. Because for her, the victory wasn't the board's decision. It was the silence of one boy who, for the first time, realized the weight of his actions. As the meeting dissolved into noise and debate, Naomi rose and walked out, her steps measured, unhurried. She didn't need to say another word. She had already said everything that mattered. And behind her, Tyler Briggs sat in the crowd, staring down at his hands. No smirk, no swagger, only the memory of the moment he learned the difference between arrogance and strength. If you believe respect should never come through fear, but through true strength, tap like and subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next story where justice rises in the unlikeliest places. And those who abuse their power learn lessons they'll never forget.